This Tuesday is commemorated as Hiroshima Day. It will be the 79th anniversary of the day the United States dropped an atomic bomb upon the city of Hiroshima, Japan. On that day and the days and weeks that followed, 140,000 men, women, and children died from the detonation of one bomb. 3 days later, the United States dropped another atomic bomb upon the city of Nagasaki, Japan, and 70,000 people perished. Today, we will reflect upon the meaning of these events for humanity and some of the deepest problems that we have faced since that time and face still. For the after effects of Hiroshima are still with us. The human crisis created in the summer of 1945 is just as real today as it was 79 years ago. We no longer use the Cold War language of brinksmanship, diplomacy, or strategic arms reductions, but face new crises of the spirit with the same problem that existed generations ago. This might seem strange to be considering today. After all, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, or the NATO countries rather, ended decades ago. Atomic weapons exist, but even nations like North Korea have decided not to detonate them. But the Cold War, in some ways, may be with us still. One of the nominees for the United States presidency has declared that when elected, that person will authorize the detonation of atomic weapons. Some advisors have stated that the United States is still building new forms of atomic weapons, but the nation cannot know whether these weapons actually work as they have never been exploded. They argue that computer simulations of the results of detonating nuclear bombs are unreliable. They argue that not knowing the results of detonating nuclear weapons puts our nation at risk in the event of a nuclear war. I would argue this morning that detonating nuclear weapons puts the world at risk for a nuclear war. Why is this something we need to consider on a Sunday morning? The first humanist manifesto, the founding document of religious humanism, a document that was signed by Unitarian and a Universalist minister, Unitarian ministers and a Universalist minister, affirmed religion consists of those actions, purposes, and experiences which are humanly significant. Nothing human is alien to the religious. It includes labor, art, science, philosophy, love, friendship, recreation, all that in its degree expressive of intelligently satisfying human living. The distinction between the sacred and the secular can no longer be maintained. For generations since 1933, this affirmation has enabled Unitarian Universalist ministers to speak on issues that other clergy persons and other religious movements could not address at times. Certainly, the detonation of nuclear weapons is a religious matter, as doing so threatens life on this planet. The United States commissioned the construction of the first atomic bomb at the beginning of the Second World War. Scientists were sent into the deserts of the Southwest to plan the bomb. As the war against Japan, Germany, and Italy progressed, the United States government developed the bomb under tight security. In 1945, President Harry Truman made the decision to end the Second World War by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima, Japan, and Nagasaki, Japan. At this point, the Second World War was mostly ended. The fascist governments of Italy and Germany were defeated and their nations occupied by Allied armies. Their leaders, those who survived, were under arrest. Nations throughout Europe and much of the world were either restored to their old governments or occupied by new ones set up by the Soviet Union or the United States. A new order began in Europe. On the Pacific Ocean front, the war was still in effect, though the Japanese Navy was only a shadow of its former strength. The Japanese government was tenaciously demonstrating its will. Suicide pilots were crashing into American and British warships. The Japanese government was also training the civilian population to fight a guerrilla war should the United States invade the Japanese mainland. From previous experience, the United States military knew that the Japanese population would fight to the death. There would be no Japanese prisoners. The cost in the United States casualties would be very high indeed. Faced with that reality, Truman ordered the nuclear bomb to be dropped on Hiroshima. It was not a decision that he or most Americans at the time regretted. The war had to end as quickly as possible. In 1959, Harry Truman asserted, "I wanted to see 500,000 boys on our side, to save 500,000 boys on our side. I never lost any sleep over my decision." I suspect that, though, that some of us, especially in the years that followed the bombing of Japan, lost sleep at times over the results of Truman's decision. No, not the bombing itself, how horrible though it was, but the chain of events that followed the end of the Second World War. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonated an atomic bomb. It was followed by the United Kingdom in 1953, whose atomic bomb was created not by the Ministry of Defense, but by the Ministry of Supply, which I think is an unusual thing. Soon thereafter, the governments of Communist China and the French Republic also had nuclear capability. It so happened that all the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council were the ones who were making the world less secure by detonating weapons of mass destruction. Soon, though, the Atomic Club expanded to include nations like Israel, South Africa, North Korea, Iran, India, and Pakistan, and I may have even forgotten some others. When I was a young man in college, I remember talking with my friends about the realities of the Cold War and nuclear weapons. We wondered if we would be asked to fight in foreign wars, or if one superpower would grow weary of diplomacy and end all life on this planet through nuclear confrontation. With the fall of the Soviet Union and the decline of real communism in the People's Republic of China, the world does not stand at the brink of nuclear war as it did so many years ago. Yet nuclear weapons are not the high technology they once were. They are so simple to make that one can find how-to guides on the internet. Though the radioactive materials with which they were made are still relatively rare, they are available sometimes on the black market. Though we do rightly worry about madmen in North Korea and Iran and extreme religious fanatics in Pakistan and India having the bomb, and craziness in our own nation, it would still be manageable if those were the only forces that had the capability of building nuclear arms. The atomic bomb and the resulting bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of the Second World War are inherently ethical and religious issues. Having grown up during the Cold War, I cannot imagine a time when atomic weapons did not exist. The Cold War was a period roughly from 1946 to 1992, when the world, there was a separation between the NATO powers and the Soviet Union and China, and there were constant wars that were not between those powers with the threat of nuclear annihilation. Unitarians and Universalists during this time, they started out separate religious movements, responded to the atomic bomb as soon as it was dropped on Hiroshima. Though liberal clergy could not understand it completely in 1945, ministers spoke about humans trying to possess the powers given by God without the wisdom that is normally ascribed to the Almighty. Almighty is the same word that Brigadier General Thomas Farrell used in the reading that preceded this message. Upon witnessing the first testing of the nuclear bomb in the desert Southwest, he inferred that mere humans now possess the powers given in our religions to gods or to God. We had harnessed the power of the sun and could destroy entire cities. This is not the God of love and forgiveness, known in the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth or many other religious sources. Nuclear bombs are not for those who would turn the other cheek. This is the part of the tragedy of humanity. In truth, there's no real limit to that which human beings can attain. By contrast, I truly believe that nothing is totally impossible for us in a good way. We could feed, house, and provide health care to everyone on this planet. It is technically possible. Everyone in this world could be provided for. The problems that we face are not technological problems, they're spiritual problems. Technology provides us with the tools to make a better world, but cultural and religious beliefs often prevent humanity from sharing in the bounty of this planet. We also cannot discount greed and the human need for status as elements of our failings. When those around the world turn to violence to resolve their issues, is it any wonder? Sometimes violence must seem the only sensible response to desperate times. For centuries, Europeans waged war, approximately every 20 years. They developed more and more technologically advanced ways to kill one another. Their sophistication grew so great that before World War I, many in Western civilization believed that war was impossible because the technology developed for warfare was too terrible to ever to use. Remember, that is an opinion about the technology of the World War I era. So our technology has advanced far beyond our civilization's ability to cope with it. We are still very much like our predecessors. After the atomic bomb was dropped on those Japanese cities, humanity did do something significant and not seen since. We, those of us from nations with the bomb, did choose our leaders with regard to their character, their patience, their diplomatic skills. If only we had continued that tradition all the time. They had to be gifted with some virtues of character during that time. We humans had taken on the powers that we had only previously ascribed to deities. Everyone on this planet lived with the sure knowledge that nuclear war was unthinkable. Many Unitarian Universalists have held hope that bodies like the United Nations would help resolve the conflicts between nations. We hold hope that in the end, in a more reasonable era will ensue than the one in which we currently live. Yet for all our abilities to create as a species, we are still dogged by the truth that it has always been easier for humanity to destroy than to create, easier for us to exercise our dislike of each other than to recognize the divine in the face of the other. The issues of the atomic bomb are still with us. Our government still spends money to develop technology that would prevent any other nuclear power from ever launching an attack on us. To be honest, I doubt that such systems could ever really protect us thoroughly. For the past 32 years, a moratorium, has existed on the testing of nuclear weapons. Our country conducted its last and 1030th nuclear weapons explosion. That's right, 1030th nuclear weapons explosion in 1955. Our governance in 19, I think it was 1993. I'm sorry. In 1995, our government announced a moratorium on nuclear weapons testing. No treaty was signed. Our nation just stopped because we had enough information not to conduct further experiments. Now, some seeking power want to relive the bad old days. If the United States detonates nuclear weapons again, it is almost certain that other nations will do so in response. Nations that have not pursued nuclear weapons might be tempted to do so. At a time when climate change is affecting every aspect of life on this planet, do we really need to set off more bombs? As irrational as human nature seems, it must be acknowledged that it has been almost 32 years since our nation exploded a nuclear weapon. Despite everything, the world still looks to the United States. As we do, so will others. Let us act in ways that prevent annihilation. We took power that was previously ascribed to the Almighty and resisted the urge to use it again. Let us continue on that path and not permit our leaders to recreate the conditions of the Cold War. May we take strength from the fact that no nuclear weapons have been used in 80 years on civilian populations or for military purposes. Grant us the wisdom and the love to restrain our worst impulses. May we have faith in one another and remember that we are all involved in this endeavor, every human being. These words by Rick Yancey are important to hold on to. And they are very significant. He says, human beings are remarkably resilient. When you think about it, our species has been teetering upon the edge of the existential cliff since Hiroshima. In short, we endure. In closing, former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, William Singleton, wrote a prayer for Hiroshima Day. Please join with me in prayer or meditation. Like most traumatic scars, the ones that are found in Hiroshima and Nagasaki are permanent, reminders of the terrible damage human beings can inflict. Similar scars can be found in the hearts and souls of people around the world who understand this terror, scars of grief, sadness, fear, and even shame. None of these scars promise an end to war and devastation. Instead, they serve as a reminder of healing and renewal, of a return to life. Gracious God, Spirit of life and love, help us to see our scars, those we have created, those we are called to witness, and those we can soothe and heal. We are deeply grateful for the buds and blossoms that even the most scarred offer as a revelation to the world. And especially on this coming 79th anniversary of Hiroshima Day, we renew our commitment to peace individually, collectively, and globally. To peace within, which claims our anxieties and fears. To peace between, which overcomes differences, animosities, and conflict. And to the great peace, beyond even our understanding, that is your gift, and which we attempt to be stewards of for the world. So be it. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom.